Prime Minister's purchase of a multi-million-dollar home in New South Wales has sparked conversation about the property holdings of federal politicians. But an ABC analysis of the financial disclosures of MPs and senators shows the PM is not alone. Political reporter Tom Crowley has crunched the numbers and he joins us now. So Tom, what sort of company is the PM in? How many politicians own multiple homes?
Well, the Prime Minister's got plenty of friends, Ros, all across the Parliament, really. Most MPs own not only one property, most MPs own multiple properties. That's what the financial disclosures that MPs and senators are required to make to parliamentary committees tell us. We pored over the figures yesterday and they show that only 12 MPs and senators across the Parliament own no property whatsoever, just the 12 of them. And even within that group, we can't be sure that that's 12 renters. So we do know that a couple of people in that group, the Greens housing spokesperson Max Chandler-Mather, Stephen Bates and Labor's Josh Burns among them are renters. But partly because of some patchy disclosures, partly because some of these people have trusts or might own companies that own real estate. Even then, we can't be entirely sure that we're seeing a full picture of the asset holdings. But even then, these are the only 12 that have not declared that they own any property whatsoever. Beyond those 12, it's really pretty much a third, beginning with the third who own just the one home. That group includes a lot of notable politicians, including opposition leader Peter Dutton. He used to own multiple properties, but he made quite a few $1 million when he sold two of the properties in his portfolio in the last few years. Greens leader Adam Bandt is one of the other ones who owns one home. Senator Jackie Lambie also in that group. Quite a political cross-section, as you can see, about 1/3 of MPs in that group who own pretty much their own home. Another third of MPs own two homes. This is a group that includes the Prime Minister, the Treasurer and the Finance Minister, among others. Once again, you'll see it's a very cross-partisan group. Now, there are a couple of reasons why MPs typically might own two houses, and one of them is that they spend a lot of time in this place behind me in Parliament House in Canberra. A lot of them have Canberra pads in the vicinity of Parliament House, and that might be one reason why they own two. For others, it might be an investment property or a holiday home. But the largest group, ever so slightly the largest group, is those who own three or more. 77 MPs in that category. Once again, 77 MPs across the party, Labor, Coalition, Greens and crossbenchers who own quite large portfolios, in some cases several investment properties scattered across the country. Top of the list is Labor's Michelle Ananda-Rajah and the Liberal MP Karen Andrews. They've got 7 apiece. There are a handful with 6 and a handful with 5. It's worth pointing out this is 34% of MPs that own multiple properties compared to just 1% of Australians who are in that category. Now, to some extent, that might be what we expect because politicians earn an above average income, and so that might be partly what explains these property holdings, but an interesting insight, as I say, that comes from poring over these documents.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a bit more, Tom, about where this data comes from.
So politicians are required by parliamentary committees to make disclosures about not just their property holdings, but any assets they hold, any gifts they receive, any memberships that they have. Basically, the idea is that to give a general picture of their holdings and their financial interests to avoid, I suppose, any perception of conflicts of interest. Now, these disclosures, they vary a little bit. As I say, they're set by parliamentary committees. There's some discretion that can be applied to how the politicians make these disclosures. The rules are slightly different. For example, senators don't have to publish details about what their spouses own, whereas members of the House of Representatives do. You know, there are also some parts where we can't always see the full picture. For example, MPs that use trusts, just like trusts all over the tax system, when MPs declare trusts, we don't know an awful lot about what's in them. So there is an incomplete picture here that we get of assets. But, you know, it's fair to say that this means that we know a fair bit more and we're able to do this sort of analysis about MPs, which we certainly wouldn't be able to do about most Australians. It gives us an interesting picture of the financial situation of our elected representatives.
And what's been the political reaction to the PM's purchase, Tom?
Well, I suppose, Ros, there's a difference between the political reaction that's been said out loud and the political reaction that's being said behind closed doors. It's fair to say that perhaps because of the list you've just seen, that MPs across the aisle have been a little bit reticent to criticise the Prime Minister for buying what will be his second home when he sells his other investment property, when, of course, many of them own multiple properties themselves. Generally speaking, most of the Labor figures who've spoken publicly have said, well, the Prime Minister's got a right to buy a home. He's perfectly entitled to do that. that they don't see an issue with it. But behind closed doors, certainly the Labor backbenchers that those of us here in Parliament House have been speaking to, Labor figures across the party, there is some concern about how this will play in the electorate in the context where the next federal election is likely to be fought, in large part on the basis of concerns about housing affordability, the optics of this. I think everyone agrees the Prime Minister is entitled to buy a home, but one Labor figure described this to us as the Prime Minister's Hawaii moment, a reference to Scott Morrison's fated trip to Hawaii during bushfires in 2019 and 2020. Whether it's of that significance, I suppose that's a matter of open debate, but there's certainly some nervousness in Labor ranks about exactly how this has been received, and I'm sure they'll be anxiously watching the news cycle over the coming days to see whether this is just a flash in the pan or whether this cements a perception of a Prime Minister that's out of touch.
Tom, thank you.
Thanks, Roz.